one another. Sisters, brothers, let us love one another.
Hello, my name is Jim Odell, and welcome to Pathos Metamorphose, the premiere episode. 20 years ago today, our world changed. 9/11 happened, and we are still living in its aftermath. So, if you ask any one of us who was alive at that time and aware of what was going on, you'll be able to remember exactly what you were doing, and your world basically stopped. So my story is I was in central New Jersey. That's where I lived, and I woke up that morning. It was a beautiful day, Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. The sun was shining, not a cloud in the sky. Gorgeous day, probably 70s at that point in the morning when I woke up. And I was to catch a train to go into the city, which I did, and I quickly rushed out the door and said goodbye to my family at the time, my wife at the time, and my son Noah, 2-year-old son, and got off the train. I was late. I think it was about 10 after 9, and the class started at 9. The class was in Midtown Manhattan. I got off at Penn Station. Remember hearing the sirens getting off. I don't think me or anyone around me knew what had happened several blocks down the way. And in lower Manhattan. And again, I heard the sirens. I was running the class. My brain registered the sirens, but not so much to think that it wasn't anything other than, normal city life. I'd only been to New York City maybe 3 or 4 times before that. So as I was running the class, I think from a garage or a garage parking ramp or something, I heard a radio or CB or something just saying, or at least what my brain registered was that a plane had hit a building. I was thinking in my head that it was a Cessna plane hit a building somewhere, not thinking that it was there in the city or anything like that, or putting anything like that together. So I got to class, and introductions were being made around the class, and I introduced myself. And it was at that time or around that time that a class member got a call on their cell phone, and basically this person had turned pale as they were talking on the phone, and after they got off the phone, the person iterated what had occurred, and that planes had hit the World Trade Center buildings, basically there was shock, obviously, and for a couple of those people that were in that class, including the person that had answered the phone, several employees were there in one of the World Trade Center buildings. There was concern that they would not be able to make it out. So anyway, the class was a secondary concern at that point, and it was agreed that there would probably not be any more class. It was a 3-day class developing policies. Developing procedure, policy, and documentation. It was an information mapping course along the lines of the work that I was doing with AT&T at the time. And so I ended up trying to get home, or just walking with a mass of humanity across the 59th Street Bridge. And I met up with a couple, or woman, Donna was her name, but she and her husband were immigrants from Poland. They took me in, and basically ended up staying overnight, because what I was hearing is that I couldn't get off the island that day. I later found out there were some what they call path trains that were going to Hoboken and leaving from there that maybe I could have caught. But Yeah, I was did a lot of walking. I want to read something that I have some excerpts of. I still have from what I had written a couple of days after 9/11, just kind of trying to get my experiences down on paper. And this is sort of the foundation for this podcast a bit. I'm quoting myself here. On the street, I felt solidarity with people I did not know. People actually had the time to talk to each other, not something you expect when visiting New York City. Not only were they talking to each other, they were sharing emotions about what was going on. So, obviously, your priorities change when something like that happens. And the primary purpose of this project, we'll call it, is to be a beacon of truth and hope to people in both the Christian faith and wider communities, testifying to the biblical love of Christ as the motivating guide for values and living, affirming the belief that all people have inherent and equal value as God's image bearers. So we've all been created in the image of God, I believe, and as such we've been created uniquely among all the created species for the purpose of mirroring the divine image of God. And when Jesus was asked which was the greatest commandment, he summed up the law and the prophets by saying two things which are like one to another. And I'll paraphrase here. He said, love God and love your neighbor. With it being implied that by loving our neighbor, those created in God's image, we are actually demonstrating how we love God. So with the above foundation being laid, this project will focus on the transformation of affections with God's help to the end that we love our neighbors well. I believe the transformation of our affections is something which needs to be radically fine-tuned in our day and in our culture. I think we could probably all agree with that. And so it's not self-righteous to say, because I think it's something that I see that needs to be transformed in my life as well. And pathos in the Greek means different things. Things like emotion, suffering, a quality that evokes pity or sadness, something that an actor would inject into their roles. Pathos, something that you can relate to on a human level. And so we want to talk about, as we go along on this journey together, this podcast or this vlog or whatever it is or will be, that we are all human beings. Again, it's my belief that we're all created in the image of God, and we are all traveling through this thing called life. I don't know if that's a direct quote of Prince, but he said something like that in one of his songs. In any case, we want to be informed by those important things. We want our worldview to be informed by the love of Christ. I want to quote James K.A. Smith. He's an author, and he said in something called You Are What You Love, the Spiritual Power of Habit. He said, your love or desire aimed at a vision of the good life that shapes how you see the world while also moving and motivating you is operative on a largely non-conscious level. Your love is a kind of automaticity. That's why we need to be aware of how it is acquired, end quote. So I believe it's important to examine what is informing our loves, our affections. What's coming out in our conversations? Are we talking about how, the right or the left is, are evil, and that, what they're on about is that they're, basically garbage? And are we loving our neighbors well by doing that? I want us to together to examine those kinds of things. What are we taking in? What's coming out of of our lives, our mouths, and are we loving our neighbors well? And that's basically what we want to talk about. And again, some of these uncomfortable things that, frankly, get ignored in our quote unquote evangelical Christian world. There are a lot of subjects that are off limits that I believe are at the heart of what we are to be about as followers of Christ. So we want to talk about some of those things. And this is a labor of love. I don't have a whole lot of extra time on my hands, and this is not something, obviously, that's finances aren't a motivating factor behind this, and there's no finances going into it, and I don't expect anything coming out of it, at least in the short term. But I would hope that it would be an encouragement to people that you're not alone, that at the center of our lives, I want to have God at the center. I don't want it to be anything socio-political. I want God to be at the center, and then that will inform these other things that we are involved in. So that's the goal of this, is to really talk about things that are uncomfortable and that are, I believe, on God's heart and should be on our hearts as well as followers of Christ. So I hope everyone's doing well, and thanks for listening. And we'll get into this more, and hopefully I'll become a better extemporaneous speaker as time goes on. But I want to thank you for tuning in, and hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Thank you.